Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today on the Make Your Money Matter show. My name is Brad Barrett. I am a managing director and partner here at One Capital Management. We are a private wealth management firm managing nearly $4.5 billion in assets for clients just like you across this great nation of ours. And now many of you have heard of our show maybe from our radio show or our podcast, and the Make Your Money Matter YouTube show is essentially an evolution of those platforms, and we're very excited about it. So I want to thank you again for joining us. And before we get started on this week's show, our inaugural show, I thought I'd share some things about me, your host. I am a family man. My wife, Veronica, my two kids, Brooks and Kate. Don't we look cute? Here's a real life picture of it. Like many of you, we're not perfect, and we're excited about that. Now, on a professional level, I got into this business when I was 16 years old, believe it or not. In fact, a couple years ago, my mom was cleaning out the house. She actually found this, believe it or not. I don't know if you can read this or not. Barrett Wealth Management. Literally, when I was 16 years old, sophomore in high school, I created a company we had to do for a project we're doing as a special project, and I chose to do financial services. Now, you might be thinking, why is a 16-year-old creating a wealth management firm at all? You might have heard of the company MCI WorldCom. Now, if you have, you probably know it was the second largest telecommunications company in the world back in the day. And if you hadn't heard of the company, if you were invested in any 401k or any index kind of fund in the late 90s, early 2000s, odds are you probably had this stock in your portfolio. And the reason why I bring this up was my dad actually started with this company, actually the original company, I think it was LDDS was the name of it. And long story short, for those of you who know the story of MCI WorldCom, in late 2002, in fact, the summer of 2002, it went bankrupt. And my dad, like many other people, lost their job. And I had a front row seat to this whole saga. He made a good salary, like many of the employees and like many of you watching today. But what he was most excited about was actually the stock options that he was given along the way. And through multiple mergers from several telecommunication companies, my dad's future was bright. Again, like many of the employees at this firm. But as you know, the leadership of this company decided to cook the books, essentially, and it went under. So in 2002, this titan of tech files for bankruptcy, the largest bankruptcy at the time in corporate history. Now, almost instantly, their stock became essentially worthless. The stock options weren't worth the paper they were printed on. Millions of Americans lost significant portions of their life savings. And my father, we lost a lot through that whole situation. And I don't tell you this story or want to share this story with you for any sympathy, but rather how that moment shaped me and how it changed my life. I was 16 years old at the time. Again, a front row seat to what it meant to have all your eggs in one basket. I saw firsthand what it looks like when you don't have a plan. You've all probably heard the phrase, people don't plan on failing, they just simply fail to plan. And my dad didn't plan on losing everything. He just failed to have a backup plan for the what if. Now, thankfully, my dad was an extremely hard worker. He dug in and did everything in his power to rebuild. And in the end, I actually think my entire family was better off for going through this because it brought us all together like nothing ever could. And for me, it lit a fire in me to learn everything I possibly could about money and, more importantly, about planning. And I made myself a promise to myself to never go through something like that in my own life. I started educating myself on these issues. I routinely saw that most advisors out there really only wanted to talk about picking winners. It seemed like every advertisement on TV or radio was how this investment outperformed that investment, growth, growth, growth. And that's the only thing every advisor talked about. Now, I want to be very clear about something. Growth isn't a bad thing by any means. But I guess what I want to share is I saw what growth without a plan results in. I became fascinated about money and investing and how with proper planning, a person can go through massive calamities and come out on the other side virtually unfazed. Now, 18 years ago, I started in this business and it became a passion of mine to share what proper planning can achieve. Now, interestingly enough, AARP says that people spend more time planning their vacations than they do their retirement, something we're going to talk about in a second. They also say that by the time we retire, think about this, by the time we retire, we'll have spent almost 90,000 hours working. I don't know about you, but that's an awful long time to work and to save for hopefully the happiest days remaining in your life. Look, a goal without a plan is just a wish. The number one fear in America is running out of money in retirement. Over the years, through our radio program, through our prospective clients, through referrals, through our show, we found that when we sit kneecap to kneecap with our clients, the number one fear and anxiety is, will I run out of money? Do I have enough money to retire? Retirement shouldn't be a wish. With a plan, it doesn't have to be. The best part about the 18 years, nearly 20 years now being in the financial services industry is once you learn how to spend your money to protect and grow your money, becoming wealthy is only a matter of time. And time is something money cannot buy. Think about this for a second. If a 90-year-old person worth, let's say, $10 million offered to trade places with you permanently, would you do it? Of course you wouldn't. Why? Because time is more valuable than money, which is why becoming financially free and independent is imperative to enjoy all that life has to offer. No one's going to remember your fancy job title or how much your corporate job paid you or the car you bought. People will remember the time you spent with them, the fun times you had, and the places you traveled to. Real wealth is time and the freedom to do whatever it is you want to do. And we hope here on the Make Your Money Matter show and here at One Capital Management to help you get there. Look, friends, everyone is on their own financial journey. No plan is alike because we all come from different backgrounds and different situations. And I say this after sharing my story. My situation might be different than yours. But in today's climate, the challenge is no longer the access to information, but rather it's finding the right information. And really, more importantly, how all of that information applies to you. And that, my friends, is my commitment to you here each and every week, because after all, your money matters. So with that, I thought it fitting to talk about one of the main subject matters, albeit, I'll be honest with you, it's not the most sexy thing to talk about, but we have to talk about it, which is planning, and why specifically having a financial plan or retirement plan is so important and vital to the success of your overall financial future. Now, before we get started, if you haven't already done so, do us a favor and smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. All right, let's get into it. Think about it this way. One of the examples I use with clients is a car. Now, I personally am not exactly the biggest car fanatic, but I have a lot of clients and friends who are. I've driven my same truck for years now. But what I use about a car analogy, which I think is really interesting when it comes to investing and planning, is you can talk all day long about how souped up your engine is, and that kind of relates in our world to a stock or an investment or something like that. And that's all great. Don't get me wrong. But if it doesn't have the chassis or the tires for it to go on, it's worthless, right? So understanding that planning, albeit not the most fun topic of the world, and why I want to lead with it, is because we have to build the foundation and the frame. And I use that same analogy, by the way, when it comes to investing. You'll hear me say it on this show. We tend to look as behavioral investors, and we're going to talk a lot about that on the Make Your Money Matter show, our behaviors as human beings as it relates to our money, because I think it's a big topic for everybody. And someone like myself who's been doing this for nearly 20 years, I see a lot of different clients, and I want to share a lot of those stories around how we view money. But back to the car analogy for a second, we tend to look at a car like, hey, the windshield's cracked or the wheels are scratched and the paint's kind of rusting, and we think the car is kind of a dud. And for money managers like us, who we consider ourselves, and this is maybe a bad example, so forgive me, team, glorified mechanics, we're looking underneath that hood and kind of going like, yeah, the oil needs to be changed here and there, but we're good to go. This engine's good. We'll fix the cracked windshield. We'll replace the wheels. We're good to go. And that's how you start creating growth and understanding volatility, and something we'll talk about. But we plan all the time for things as innocuous as what time we're leaving the house, and hopefully for things as important as having your retirement plan put together. I mean, think about it. Has anyone ever asked you what your plans were for the weekend, let's say, or maybe if you've made plans for a family vacation? I ask this because we tend to think out things in our life in more pleasurable and more personal aspects, but not the hard stuff. We plan because we don't want things to go wrong. We want to ensure success, don't we? I mean, after all, when taking a vacation, who wants to miss their flight or arrive at a hotel to learn there's no reservation? I know I don't. Planning comes before doing, and in a way, planning creates a blueprint for potential success. It increases the odds that if we follow our plan, we'll enjoy success. My business owners out there, you probably created a pro forma, a business plan, and you sought it out, you researched it, you sought counsel around that, and you go through that. And in my analogy of airport, if you arrive on time and you get that plane, you'll be greeted at your hotel eventually when you get there with great anticipation. It also encompasses setting goals. Think about a boat for a second. Now, I don't know if you're a boat person or not, but think about it for a second. If a boat captain, if he doesn't clear a chart in his mind and have a destination in mind, what do you think would happen? He'd probably sail aimlessly through the open sea, perhaps ending in a wreck or falling victim to treacherous waters. There's no road signs out there. And a lot of retirement landscape is a lot like an ocean. We think we kind of know the navigation, but setting course with a plan is really what's most important. But again, if they started out with a specific goal in mind and followed a careful plan, they would likely experience a much higher degree of probability of arriving at their destination. Now, all my rambling just now, it just makes sense, right? And again, having worked in the financial industry for over 18 years now, I spent a lot of time in planning sessions. And to be honest, planning has helped me personally achieve more than I otherwise would have. You're seeing me today on this show because of 9 months of pre-planning. It takes time, but it's so worth it. And when it comes to planning, there's a book I read as an author named Stephen Covey, and he's credited with the profound but very simple statement, start with the end in mind. In other words, what's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? Where is your ship heading? So as we're talking about planning, I want to talk about the 3 categories that I found in nearly 20 years that most people fall into when it comes to planning. But I wanted to share a study that I was exposed to a few years ago, and it focused on the 1979 graduates of the Harvard Business School. Now, the graduates were asked if they had, and I'm quoting here, clear written goals. Now, what the study found was that only 3% had written goals and plans. 13% had goals, but they weren't in writing, and 84% hadn't set any goals at all. Now, here's what I found absolutely astounding. 10 years after the initial study, the same Harvard MBA students were interviewed again, and here's what was concluded. The 13% of students who had goals but hadn't committed them to writing were earning on average, get this, on average, twice the amount of income as the 84% who had no goals at all. Now, the 3% of students who had written goals were earning 10 times as much as the other 97%. Wild, right? The only differentiator here is actually having written goals and the plans to achieve them. I think that's amazing. And now, if you want to find out more about this study and actually more on that topic, the book that I was exposed to was written by a guy named Mark McCormick. It's titled What They Don't Teach You in Harvard Business School. And if you think about it, we all should have written goals and the plans to achieve them. I mean, I know people who set mood boards for whatever they want to do that week. I mean, we set boards for anything, but yet sometimes we just don't focus on some of these big topics in life, the most important ones. In fact, most of us just don't. And I shared a little bit of a study earlier, but the investment company Charles Schwab actually did another study for 1,000 retirees. And what they found was that more than half of those surveyed spent 5-fold more time researching and planning the purchase of a new car than choosing an investment strategy in their company-sponsored 401k plan. Now, over the years, I've met with countless retirees who span the spectrum of wealth, everyone from 1 zero behind their name to multiple zeros behind their name. But most have been average Americans like you and me, and probably a lot have been ones that you'd relate to. And I've been with few, very few, who have truly planned for their retirement, yet everyone expresses a concern about their retirement and wants to set it. Everyone tells me it's an important topic, but few have actually laid out the concise written plan. So I want to talk about 3 categories that I think most people fall into. Now, I boiled this down over the many years of client interviews, discussions, discoveries, as we call it here at One Capital Management. And I want to go through that with you. The first category is someone who has completed no planning. And I mean no planning whatsoever. By the way, we all know there's an old adage, as many of you know, no one plans to fail, they just fail to plan. Remember, if you don't know where you're heading, any old road will do, right? And many of those roads may not be where you want to go. So you want to make sure we get a plan in place. If you're in that first category, that's where you want to seek counsel, find that advisor, build that plan because you want to build that framework. All right, category number 2. The second category is someone who is actually taking the time and effort to plan for their retirement. They may have met with an investment advisor who, in conjunction with other professionals such as an attorney or maybe a CPA, they compose an elaborate retirement strategy made up of a 80-page document filled with charts and graphs and hypotheticals and probabilities, and of course, pages and pages of disclaimers and disclosures. And after probably spending thousands of dollars on this report, it's seldom read or understood by anyone. So I ask this: if you don't know how to understand your actual plan with your numbers and your goals well enough to concisely articulate that to your spouse, how can you reasonably expect it to execute that plan? I don't think you can. I mean, the whole thing just becomes this pointless exercise to make you feel better. Again, the emotional psyche is strong here, but really not likely accomplishing much. Most people don't need the same level of planning, to be honest, as, say, Jeff Bezos. I mean, the average American should have a coordinated plan, pulling together their Social Security benefits, 401k assets, IRAs, pensions, savings, all of which should be balanced against their standard of living in retirement, and it should be an uncomplicated plan. We have a saying here at One Capital Management: simple and elegant. When you have a simple and elegant, uncomplicated plan, a plan that you understand why you are doing what you are doing with your retirement assets, and it has to be a plan you can explain. All right, now the third category. This one's kind of funny. Let's have a little fun on the show, right? It's actually what I call the junk drawer. Now, I'll often meet with someone who over the years has made a whole bunch of unrelated financial purchases, and now years later mistakes these unrelated purchases for some big cohesive plan. Like, for example, when they first got married, they might have purchased a life insurance policy from maybe a college friend. And then when they had their first child, they might have started a college savings plan of some sort with a neighbor or someone who's in the business. And maybe further along the way, they may have picked up a long-term care insurance policy and maybe made a few other investment decisions. And now every financial decision that I just mentioned as an example was made in a vacuum on its own merits and not really in coordination with other investments or products or services, or really as part of a larger plan. Now, despite all those actions, it's actually thought of as a coordinated retirement plan. But as you know, in watching here today, it's not. I call it the junk drawer plan because it's like the junk drawer in our kitchen. Like, I know I have one in my kitchen. I know you do too. And I've been throwing stuff in there, and my wife and I have been throwing stuff in there for years. Now our kids are, and it's filled with a bunch of unrelated purchases. Now, they're all valuable. They're all important stuff, and we use them, but they're all standalone items. Nothing's really coordinated with the other. Now, the good news in your financial junk drawer is many times these items can be pulled together. Okay, synergies, they're possible, but they each need to be analyzed. They need to be put together somewhat like a puzzle, and we need to weed out some of the bad, or maybe not so much bad, but just not applicable to you today, and keep the good and make sure everything fits in context of a true plan. And something we talk about here at One Capital Management is integration, making sure your investment management goes with your tax management, your insurance management, your overall risk management. So you want to really make sure you have an integrated plan when you talk about planning. So which of the three categories do you fall into? 1, 2, or 3? Did you fail to plan, or did you create a plan that you don't really understand? Or maybe you're entering your retirement years, or you start thinking in your 30s and 40s that you want to be a little bit more financially free, but you're armed with this financial junk drawer. Now, something I should state, as I mentioned before, it doesn't matter how old you are. It really matters about when you get started. Alexander Graham Bell has a great quote. The only difference between success and failure is taking action. Take action. It's really wise for anyone at any age to get that planning started. On this show, we will talk a lot about investing, planning, different strategies, all the items that we go through with our clients here at One Capital Management. That's what we want to share on this show. But I wanted to choose this episode, this first episode, to really set the tone for planning. Build that structure. Make sure that all the fancy engines and all the great stuff we'll talk about fits into your plan. That, my friends, is what matters. Now, at the end of the day, I should mention this, and it's very important, us as private wealth managers, finding that advisor that you can build trust with, to be able to lean on and build a relationship with, is vitally important. They want to understand, and you want them to understand, your true goals and objectives. That's what matters to help define how you manage your assets, how you look at money. Everyone has different DNA traits, different upbringings, different ideas about money. I can't tell you how many conversations I've been in with spouses in particular who've been married for 15, 20, 30 years, but at the end of the day, they were raised in different environments. And we bring those into our marriages, into our business partnerships, and money is a powerful tool, right? There's three things that we all keep close to our chest, right? Money, politics, and religion. And it's never lost on me what we talk about here at One Capital Management. That's why it's private. We are fiduciaries to our clients. We keep things comprehensive, but also confidential. And it's really important when we go through that with people to make sure that we discuss that and we build that trust with someone. And everything that I just described, we do here at One Capital Management. And it's really important to make sure that you find that counsel, find that advisor to help you build the plan that makes sense for you. At the end of the day, the late, great Tommy Lasorda, I think, said it best. There are three kinds of people in this world: people who make it happen, people who watch what happens, and people who wonder what happens. Make that call. Find someone you can build trust with. Make it happen. Take action. So what I want to do every show is actually have a question session. And if you have a question that popped in your mind as you're watching today, or you want answered or looked at by an advisor, you can leave a comment in the comment section below, or you can go to our About section on our page and send a direct email if you want to talk one-on-one. So the question for this week actually came from a prospective client we had last week. And the question was this, and I thought it actually was a good one. What's the difference, Brad, between saving and investing? Now, it may sound simple in the onset, but it's actually a very different approach. And actually, it gets into something we talk about from kind of a base level of planning, right? Where it's bucket planning. You might have heard of this before, where you got short-term, mid-term, long-term bucket planning. Now, when talking about saving versus investing, you're really toggling between first and second bucket there. What I mean by that is this. Typically, you want your rainy day fund of just cash to be anywhere between 3 and 6 months of overhead. So for example, if you have $10,000 of overhead, which would encompass your living expenses and your lifestyle expenses, let's say it was $10,000. You should have somewhere between $30,000 to $60,000 of cash on hand ready to go. Now, that range really comes down to the suitability and the tolerance level of a client. Like personally for me, I keep a little bit less cash and would rather that go into investing, but that's my tolerance level as an example. But once you have that cash and you kind of get comfortable with where you're at there, that's when you start going into the investing conversation. Now, the investing here obviously was largely around the cash conversation. Obviously, when it comes to IRA assets, 401ks, and retirements, I'll talk about this a lot, but you want to be careful about how much cash you keep in there. You want to set a certain allocation for it, but those assets you really want to be growing. They're tax deferred. Typically, they have tax-free growth on them. So you really want to kind of make sure those are managed when it comes to investing. But cash investing, get to your 3 to 6 months, get to your rainy day fund. As soon as you get on top of that, that's where you want to start looking at investing. And the second question that actually came up in this same conversation and why I wanted to bring it up today has a lot to do with the planning, a lot to do with this first episode here of the Make Your Money Matter show, but it had to do with what should I be looking for in a financial advisor? And I want to answer that very clearly. 3 things, okay? Apparently today's the number of 3 today. There's 3 categories of planning, but there's 3 things you should look for in a financial advisor. Number 1, independence. 2, a fiduciary acting on your behalf always. And number 3, credential. So let's talk about it. Independence, you want to find someone who doesn't have necessarily bosses or trying to sell you something or commission related. Now, I'm not saying those are bad necessarily, but really think about it, right? You want someone sitting on your side of the table always, sitting kneecap to kneecap with you, and you feel that they truly have your best interest in mind. Now, there's a lot of laws that have come out and things that have gone through, and we'll talk about in the second thing to look for, but independence to us matters. Here at One Capital Management, we're a registered investment advisory firm. We have no bosses. We have no big bank behind us necessarily. It's just us managing it for our clients to do the best we can with what our clients want for their assets. Number 2, fiduciary. That's the best interest of client, making sure that we are always acting in your best interest, which we've always done. We've done it since inception. And number 3, credentials. I think it's really important to look at because, a little shocker here, the barrier of entry to becoming an advisor isn't very high. It's a Series 65 license, and basically you can go and be an advisor. There's no experience necessarily. So you want to find that someone, that advisor, who is credentialed, who is wanting to learn for themselves, to better themselves, to be a better advisor to you. Some credentials that I think are really great to look for are CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst, CFP, Certified Financial Planner, CPWA, Certified Private Wealth Advisor. Now, these are all really great credentials in the advisory space. They're a lot like what we commonly know in vernacular as a CPA, the certified public accountant. A lot of us have tax accounts with CPA, but finding that credentialed advisor is really important. And I think of those three things is really what you want to look for when it comes to an advisor. So again, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to discuss or want me to read here, leave it in the comment section below or email us on our About page on our channel. Now, before we go, if you've found anything helpful today and want to learn more, you can visit us on our website. It's there on the screen, or give us a call. You can also text us. You can text the word track. We want to help. Listen, there's no pressure here. We don't treat people like a number. In fact, we value relationships. It's the lifeblood of what we do. So click, call, or text us today. And if you're not following us on our social media, you should be. We're sharing great information on all of our social media platforms. And as I often say, if you enjoy the show, share with someone you like. And if you don't like the show, I guess share with someone you don't like. But I'll see you next week right here on Make Your Money Matter.